In the U.S. Army Special Forces, there's a training program based on Stoic philosophical practices. It's a grueling circuit called mixed fitness. The participants compete against each other. They compete to see who can complete more circuits in a given amount of time. These exercises include 21 sets of pull-ups, 21 sets of sit-ups, 21 sets of 24-inch box jumps, 20 sets of unassisted deep squats, 1-mile run. Finish the day wearing a 20-pound suit. Instructor Michael says, it's not just a sport, it's a daily personality test. A man can cheat his way to a faster time, but he knows he's cheating. What it does is test whether a person has made the right decisions under extreme physical and emotional stress. It prepares trained members for the unexpected. It teaches them to practice control. Instructors teach them how to be like James Stockdale. They taught them how to use ancient philosophies to survive 7 years of torture in a Vietnamese POW camp. They practiced training on an empty stomach. They learned to starve and control themselves when necessary. It taught them how to survive in a harsh environment. Instructor Michael said, I like what the Stoic philosopher, Musonius Rufus, had to say about this. He said, you should look at food as nourishment that gives you strength, and you should look at it with a transcendental perspective. But if you depend on it, get a lot of pleasure from it, and let it control you, then it's dangerous. It's like Socrates said, to eat is to live, but to live is not to eat. This is Stoic philosophy. It's the practice and training of a life program. It's training the mind and the body to overcome all difficulties. Welcome to Audible Wisdom. We're talking about this topic, Stoic philosophy for a strong mind and body. Philosophy is not a simple game of the mind. People often think of philosophy as a purely intellectual game. You can become philosophical by sitting comfortably in a chair and thinking. But for some ancient philosophers, philosophy is an exercise of mind and body. It was a philosophy that was taught and practiced in the classroom as well as in the gymnasium. Philosophers were as famous for their fit bodies as they were for their sharp minds. Plato was a famous wrestler. Creusus of the Stoics was a boxer. Socrates was considered the strongest soldier in the Athenian army. Wisdom is not merely theoretical. The ancient Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned his students, you may know all about wisdom in the classroom, but when you put it into practice, you will find that most of you fail. He emphasized that philosophy is a training of mind and body. The philosopher responsible for this idea was Epictetus' teacher, Musonius Rufus. Rufus was nicknamed the Roman Socrates. He had some very radical views at the time, in the ancient Roman era of slavery. He said, slaves have the right to disobey the unjust commands of their masters, and that women could learn philosophy as well as men. Such radical ideas angered the imperial authorities. He was twice exiled from the Roman Empire. Rufus insisted that philosophy was worthless without practical training. He told his students, virtue is not only theoretical knowledge, it's practice. Like medicine and music, doctors and musicians must not only know their theories, but also practice their application. If a man only knows the theories, but has never practiced resisting temptation, he can't achieve self-control. Rufus emphasized that philosophical training was for the mind as well as the body. He suggested that Stoic students be trained to adapt themselves to cold, heat, thirst, hunger, fasting, hard beds, abstinence, and hard work. After experiencing these things, the body would become stronger. The body is less easily disturbed by emotions. The mind becomes stronger. The Stoics, like the Pythagoreans, believed that occasional voluntary fasting was a good way to improve self-control. Stoics practiced to gain inner freedom and resilience in the face of adversity. 2. Know your progress at all times. How did the Stoics know if they were making progress in their training? Take an example. When we train, we have no way of knowing if we're actually making progress, unless we track how far we can run, how much we can lift, how many calories we burn, what our pulse rate is, how much we've improved in these areas over time. The ancient Stoics evaluated their philosophical training in the same way. They tracked their own thoughts, feelings, and actions over time to see if they were actually progressing. One common practice they used was to keep a journal. At the end of the day, Stoics in training would briefly write down their behavior in their journals. They would reflect on how they had spent the day, what they did well, what they could have done better. That's what Seneca did. He said, "Every day we must look into our soul, to record it." If a Stoic student noticed that he's having trouble controlling his temper, they would observe themselves continuously throughout the day. At the end of the day, he'd count the number of tantrums he had that day. Write it down in their journal. See how they've improved over time. Epictetus told his students, "If you want to get rid of your bad temper, count the days when you're not angry. I used to be gripped by irrational emotions every day. Now it's every other day, then every 2 days, and then every 3 days." Journaling also allows us to reflect on the moments of intense negativity during the day, and then dig down to find the source of that emotion. Then we can examine the cause and see if it makes sense. Risk 3. The Diary of Marco Aurelius. The most famous diary is the Meditations of Marco Aurelius. Aurelius was the emperor of Rome from 161 to 180 AD. He was also the last of the 5 wise emperors, according to historians. Edward Gibbon, an 18th century historian, said that the reign of the 5 wise men was the happiest and most prosperous period in the history of mankind. In reality, Aurelius' reign was not an easy one. During his reign, Rome suffered a series of catastrophes: floods, earthquakes, plagues, and constant revolts on the empire's northern borders. The last 10 years of Aurelius' life were spent in war, fighting Germanic barbarians in exhausting, vicious winter campaigns. He missed his family. He longed for a break from the endless war, but he stayed at his post. He kept a diary in which he recorded his thoughts. He tried to cope with the challenges of life. The Meditations are the journals he kept. Aurelius used his journals as an inner gym for mental discipline. He used writing as an exercise in self-control. In the late 60s and early 70s, Walter Mischel of Columbia University conducted a series of famous marshmallow experiments. In this experiment, children were placed in a room with a plate of marshmallows in front of them. The experimenter told them they had 2 choices. They could eat a marshmallow right away, or they could wait 15 minutes and eat 2 pieces. In this experiment, about 1/3 of the children were able to hold out for 15 minutes. 20 years later, Mischel found out by following the lives of these children, those who resisted the temptation of marshmallows longer tended to accomplish more as adults. The longer they resisted the temptation of marshmallows, the fewer personal behavior problems they had in school, and the better their grades. From that point on, self-control has become a hot topic in psychology. Several studies have shown that self-control is a more important factor in academic success. Self-control is a more significant factor than IQ. Self-control is even a very major factor in a person's financial stability, job stability, and marital stability. Thus, self-control is a key personality trait. This research is also beginning to be extended to schools. For example, in KIPP, the Knowledge is Power program schools across the United States, school stores are now selling t-shirts with the slogan, "Don't eat marshmallows." So, is it true that this kind of self-control can be improved by training as the Stoics believed? Through research, psychologists increasingly agree with the Stoic philosopher Rufus. We can improve our self-control with training. Self-control is one of the 4 virtues promoted by the Stoics. Just as the Stoics believed, psychologists have found that self-monitoring of results is important for this type of training. In 1983, psychologist Albert Bandura, professor emeritus at Stanford University, and his colleague Daniel Selvona conducted an experiment with 90 cyclists. They tested the performance of these people. They divided them into 4 groups. Some groups were not given a goal, and no one told them how far they'd cycled in a timely manner. Some groups were given a goal and told how far they had cycled in time. As a result, the last group performed significantly better than the other 3, setting specific goals and documenting our progress toward them. This motivates us to keep going. What's an easy way to practice self-control? It's to keep a journal, just like the ancient Stoic philosophers did. Roy Baumeister of Florida State University is a leading expert on the psychology of self-control. He did an experiment. He had people keep a food diary for a few weeks, recording what they ate. The results of the experiment showed this simple form of self-monitoring improved their self-control. This self-control then extended to other areas of their lives. For example, it enabled them to manage their finances better. Why does this training work? Baumeister says, the mechanism of self-control is like a muscle. It can only be developed through repeated practice. Philosophy makes us our own doctors. Self-tracking is a global activity called quantifying the self. Its principles are in the style of Socrates, know thyself by numbers. Quantified self participants use digital devices to track their daily intake of calories, alcohol, heart rate, blood sugar levels, and other information. Their heart rate, blood glucose levels, exercise regimen, social life, emotions, and finances are tracked. Participants in this program like to share the results of their training with others. They have found that when they share how much progress they've made toward their weight loss and other goals, they are more likely to stick with their workouts and get support from others. One person who has taken self-quantified living to the extreme is Tim Ferriss. He's written books like The 4-Hour Workweek. Tim is a big fan of Stoic philosophy. He calls himself a life hacker. He's trying to figure out how to make the most of the smallest changes in his life. Like what? He experiments with himself to see what changes make him sleep better, run faster, recover better, and live more harmoniously. He has a heart rate monitor, an ultrasound machine, and all the medical equipment he needs to measure skin electrical conduction, REM sleep, and more. It may sound a bit fanatical, but all this self-tracking allows Ferriss to experiment on himself, to see what changes really work, and measure how much progress he's making toward his goal. Of course, there's another important question. What are you training for? You may want to train hard just to look good or to get rich, to win the admiration of the world, or some other external goal. But that's very different from the Stoic goal. Stoic training is about freedom from external dependence. You can also use self-observation for internal character goals, like getting rid of a bad temper. Journaling allows a person to become more aware of their unconscious bad habits and then change them. For example, write down 3 things you're grateful for every day. Aurelius used this method. He thanked people for what they did for him. Self-reflection is a curious combination of ancient philosophy and modern cognitive therapy techniques. Socrates' disciple Xenophon said, Socrates strongly encouraged his companions to study their own bodies throughout their lives, to see what kind of food, drink, or exercise would be good for them. He said, anyone who observes himself in this way will find that it's hard to find a doctor who knows better than you what's good for your health. As the ancient Roman philosopher Cicero put it, training us to be our own physicians. Self-education puts the power in our hands. We can all become experts in our own self-improvement. 4. Stoic philosophy and physical activity. The Stoics often compared philosophy to training for the Olympics. The Creator puts you through hardships, like a boxing trainer sending you a sparring partner to see how well you've trained, to see how far you've come in your training, to see how much you've improved in body, mind, and spirit. Historian Darren McMahon once said, in a strange way, athletic coaches are now filling the places in schools once occupied by philosophers and priests. He said, the only people teaching values in schools seem to be the athletic coaches. Take the movie Coach Carter. It's a ragtag school team motivated by a coach to get better and better. Eventually, they become the state all-star team, even though they lost the final game of the championship by 1 point. But at the end of the day, the coach came into the locker room and gave a very stoic speech. He said to the students, you have accomplished what others spend their lives trying to accomplish. You've achieved the most difficult victory your heart could ever hope for. That's what the Stoics said. Sports do not just train and develop our bodies. It trains our character. It trains us to survive pain, to triumph over life's misfortunes, to maintain a steady resolve through life's ups and downs. Like Sam Sullivan. Sam Sullivan broke his spine in a skiing accident when he was 19 years old. He was paralyzed in his arms, legs, and body, but he found salvation in Stoic philosophy. As he waved the Olympic flag as mayor of Vancouver at the 2006 Olympics, he remembered the words of Epictetus, when trouble comes to you, you must remember. It's just that the Creator, like a wrestling coach, has given you a strong man to be your opponent. That's all for this issue. If you found today's lesson helpful, don't forget to share it with your family and friends. See you next time.